Okay.
Okay, so I will
Yes.
start and I
Yes.
wish perhaps you make an introduction.
Yes. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Dean of the Animal Science Faculty of Universitas Brawijaya, the faculty staff and lecturers, and also the student of the graduate programs. All praise Allah SWT, and may His blessing be showered to us here in life and the afterlife. May our life fill with health and happiness, and may we find ourselves to keep striving to become a better person every day. First and foremost, I'd like to welcome all the audience here and today's virtual guest lecture. Today's guest lecture is a continuation of the 3 series of international guest lecture held in the Animal Science Faculty of the University of Brawijaya. I introduce myself. My name is Nurkolis, and I am going to be the host of today's guest lecture. We, as the committee, sincerely hope that this series of guest lecture would broaden our horizon and improve our knowledge upon the animal science we decide to study. I also like to thank our keynote speaker today, Dr. Thierry Giddens, who allowed his time to present another lecture to our faculty. Although it is regrettable that the class has not been conducted virtually again, it is greatly appreciated for you to be able to share your knowledge and expertise to the young student today. I hope the near future we will be able to conduct an offline international lecture in our beloved university. Before we actually start the guest lecture, I would like to brief some rules about our virtual class today. Just like the usual virtual class, I expect all students to turn on all their cameras, mute their mics during the lecture. The lecture will be conducted in English, and for those who want to ask questions but not confident in English, it's okay to ask in Bahasa Indonesia, as I will translate the question for you. And now, before the start the guest lecture, I would like to talk a bit about our speaker of the topic today, which is the feeding behavior of the rabbit and the importance of fiber in rabbit feeding. Let me speak a few words about the speaker today. Our speaker, Thierry Giddens, came from France. He is a senior researcher at INRAS, a president of the World Rabbit Science Association, and has spent years delving into the rabbit world. He currently works as a researcher in INRAS, and he is one of the most trusted experts when it comes to rabbit. Please welcome to Dr. Thierry. Times for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very nice introduction. And it's an honor for me to be invited to give this lecture and try to disseminate some knowledge to you and to your students too. So I will share my screen now so that you will see the first slide. Is it okay for this first slide?
Yes,
Yes, the sound is okay.
so okay.
Okay, perfect. So for this second lecture today, we will speak about rabbit feeding behavior and also about dietary fiber requirements for nutrition and health, particularly for the growing rabbit. Okay. So I will move to the next one. Here is the index in two parts. First, feeding behavior of the rabbit. Secondly, fibers and digestive health. Okay, so feeding behavior, I will detail in 5 parts. First, some recall about anatomy and digestive physiology. This will be very useful for the next lessons in 1 week also. I will speak about standard feeding behavior of domestic rabbits, according particularly to the age. We will look also at external factors influencing this feeding behavior, particularly the diet, but not only the diet, also the environmental factors. This is very important. The feeding behavior also, if you have free choice situations, that to look at the rabbit, he has some own choice, and it's important to know them also. We'll see some conclusion. So, first of all, probably you already know this figure about the different parts of the rabbit digestive tract. It is to recall that this rabbit is not only monogastric, and you will see in yellow and green the sections that refer more specially to the monogastric digestion, as for pig, for example, or the human. But rabbit is also an herbivore. And so you will see the distal part of the digestive tract with the cecum, very important, and also the proximal colon, very important too, in pink. As you will see here, the weight and the volumes and the pH, you will see the stomach is very acid segment, and the stomach volume is very relatively low, relatively low stomach volume that corresponds or should be related to meals that are a low size. And you will see after that the rabbit make frequent low-sized meals. Reversely, the volume of the cecum is very large, and the pH is about neutral, like more or less in the rumen for cow or sheep, etc. And in this cecum and proximal colon, you have a very high microbial activity. So two different parts relating with two different system of digestion impact. Rabbit and horse are similar digestive system. Feeding behavior. Probably you know already that the rabbit had a strong ability and taste for nibbling and gnawing for solid food, but not only. Greedy in situation of choice, does not regulate, is not regulated his take according to its need, because he makes his own selection, and sometimes that is a wrong selection if he has the choice. particularly for companion animals. You have to be careful for companion rabbits about the choice of the rabbits itself. If you are in breeding conditions for rabbit farming, in Europe for intensive rabbit productions, we produce pellets of feed, and they don't have a choice, of course, since the pellets contain various ingredients, plant ingredients, and minerals and vitamins. One of the advantages to have pellets is to reduce the waste, to improve the feed conversion, and also to have a good and easy storage because it is a dry feed compared to, for example, whole plants, whole seeds or grains. The rabbits can have also can feed with grains or flour or even, but the more efficient for intensive systems is to have pelleted feed. We will start with feeding behavior, which was look in conventional breeding systems. That means a doe, like you see, that is milking, doe with pellets and in cages. From birth to weaning, in fact, the kids only have one suckling per day, only one. And the duration of the suckling is very short, you see, 2 to 4 minutes. And they can eat 8 to 10 grams of milk. That means 1/6 of the birth weight of young kids at birth. The birth weight of a kid is about like a egg, 60 grams, more or less. The young rabbit, as you perhaps know, at birth is naked, deaf, and blind. But the first milking is very important for the survival of the kid. And for that, you have to find the teats very quickly at the first milking. And for that, there is a pheromone. It is a mammal pheromone because pheromone is very common for insects, but there are also some pheromone in mammals. And the first pheromone discovered for the mammals was discovered for the rabbit doe. This pheromone, you see, this is 2-methyl-butanol. It is a very small molecule that is produced around the teats, and so the kids is very have to the odor of the pheromone is very important for the kids, as the kids find very easily the position of the teats. And there is no appropriation of a teats by a kids like for piglets, for example, but kids turn over several teats in the same milking period. And also, when they have 5 to 15 days, the kids also can eat some hard feces that are left by the mother in the nest. And this hard feces could participate also to the microbial implantation, microbial maturation of the digestive system of the kid. Okay, you will see some shots, some photo. Effectively, the doe is preparing a nest, a nest which is very with a thermic control, a very high thermic control. And for that, the doe leaves some hair, the ventral hair, abdomen, to improve the thermal comfort of her litter. At the first milking, the young kids you see here could have, if you have a good intake of milk, that means 50% of the live weight. Imagine you have to intake 50% of your live weight. If you weigh, for example, 60 kilo, more or less, it means that 10 kilos are, you have to drink 7 to 8 kilos of milk in one time in 2 minutes. It's very, so the rabbit kits is very efficient to teach, and you will see that the quality of the milk is very important because you have only one milk in the day. Just to recall that for the milking, the majority of the female are 4 pairs of teeth, but according to the genotype of the doe, this number of teeth could change a bit. You can have sometimes 6, sometimes more than 4 pairs, sometimes 5 pairs of teeth, depending on the genotype of the female. I will insist on this point that the milk is very important for the rabbit, and the quality of the milk is very important. I will compare here rabbit milk production compared to the cow and compared to the sow. You see that the rabbit female is a very high producer of milk, similar to a cow. This figure is valid in conventional European systems. The quantity of milks depend also of the size of the litter. Okay, these figures are okay for a litter size of 8 or 10. If you have a litter size of 6 or 8 kids, you have a lower production of milk. But the rabbit female have a very high production of milk. But the more important is that the quality, the composition of the milk of the rabbit is very concentrated compared to cow. You see the dry matter of the rabbit milk is twice of the dry matter of that of goat, cow, or sheep. And also the crude fat, you see the lipid content of the rabbit milk is very high, about 3 times higher than for the cow. 13% of crude fat and also 15% of protein. So in one milking, the kid is able to have an intake of nutrients enough for one full day. Understand? And so when you feed the rabbit female, you have to look very carefully at the quality of the feed, because this rabbit female is exporting a high quantity of nutrients through this milk. Okay, so it is exporting a lot, according to me, much more lipids than a cow, much more protein than a cow or a sow. You see here the figure. So take care of the feeding behavior and the feed quality for this female. Just a small video. You see the behavior of milking. In this video, it is in outside, and when I move a bit, you will see the rabbit is digging. Okay, this is a garden. He is digging to make possible milking for the kids that are in the burrow. And you see just below the abdomen of the female, she have a special position. You see the kids that are moving a lot under, and they teeth for one teeth, they milk for another teeth, and so on. You more or less, this is the same behavior for the kids and for the female in cages or in farms also. Okay. Up. We move to the next one. So this first feeding behavior for the milk and also the dough is very important because this is the mother decision to allow only one suckling per day. Okay. Sometimes you can have two, but depending on the number of liters, but more or less 90% of the dough suckle only one time a day and for a very short period. Here is a graph summarizing the feeding behavior of the young rabbits. So you will see the milk intake in brown, and the peak of the milk intake is about 3 weeks after birth. At this moment also, the young rabbits start to eat some sweet food from the mother feeder. Okay, and in conventional systems, for example, in European conventional systems, they start to eat the pellets of the mother if they are able to access to this feeder, if it's not too high, for example, or accessible. And for that, effectively, the young rabbits should be able to move and to have some movement to go to the feeder of the female. And at the same moment, they have also some water intake. Of course, if there is systems outdoor, for example, young rabbits possibly start to eat some grasses at about sometimes 18 or 19 days when they go out of the nest. During the 2 first weeks, feeding behavior of the young rabbit is in the nest and it has access only to milk, more or less. Okay, after 18 till the weaning, if you have a weaning at, for example, at 1 month, the young continue to receive the mother milk once a day, but also you have donc another nutrient source, which is the pellets, for example, or eventually the food that are in the feeder of the mother. Okay, and also you know probably that the rabbits have a psychotroph productions that start with the solid food intake at about 3 weeks of age. So when the young rabbit is weaned, it is not a weaning, and the feed for the inchon is already starting, is already on. For example, if you have at 21 days only the milk with many lipids and protein too, when you wean the rabbit with only solid feed, the nutrient transition is very hard because you have only 4% of lipid in the pellet, for example, with many starch and fibers too. So within 2 weeks, the young rabbit has to install new digestive functions more typical of an herbivore. And so you have to the young rabbit has to develop microbial activity and fiber fermentation and secotrophy that occur mainly in the distal part of the tract. Here we will see just a graph that shows the nutrient intake of the young rabbit. It is still in classical feeding system with pelleted feed. And the hypothesis is for one pelleted diet for female and litter, the same diet for female and litter, and the weaning is at either it has 7 weeks, it has 5 weeks old. Sorry. So when you, for the milk protein here in red and feed protein in blue, you will see the change when you wean. Okay, but already there is some feed protein before the weaning, but most of them is at about 3 weeks of age. When you add the milk, the lipids, you will see the lipids very, very important at the beginning of the life of the young rabbit, but much less important after. Sugars, very few sugars in the milk, but there are some in the feed. And particularly, you will see here in green that fibers becomes a very important source of nutrients after weaning and also just before. Starch is very important too, but only at about from the pellets only, but there is large change also. So feeding behavior of the young, you will see for conventional European system, milk intake from birth to 2 weeks old is about 150 to 200 grams, okay? And then 200 grams to 250 1 week later, and was a bit lower just before the weaning. And reversely, the pellet feed intake is increasing a lot, particularly during the weeks before weaning. We see here the quantity. Just some words for secotrophy to explain what is secotrophy exactly. It is not coprophagy. This secotrophy starts when the young rabbits start to eat some solid food, the pellets, for example, or anything else. And so when you look at the feeding behavior of the young rabbits before 3 weeks and weaning, finally you have 3 sources of nutrients: the milk, the solid feed, and the secotroph. As I said, secotrophy is not coprophagy. Probably you already know that coprophagy is one type of excretion into one day for everybody. This is an ingestion of a fraction of the feces, which is occasional or systematically for some rodents like olacord or capybara, and also from species, particularly when they are young, like the rat, the dog, etc., or if there is a pathology, for example. But here we speak about secotrophy, which is a normal behavior, very important behavior for the lagomorph, for example. It is so as for the normal digestive system of lagomorph, you have excretion of 2 types of feces. Okay, feces that you see very easily, this is the hard feces. These droppings are on the soil. They are something that is waste. Okay, this is created. And another type of feces, the soft feces or secotroph, that you never see. You never see because the lagomorph, and particularly the rabbits, eat the soft feces at the rectum directly. You will see after a light video. So it is a natural and complete behavior, like for example, rumination for the cow. And this is also a nutritional interest because the rabbit can recycle some bacterial proteins, some vitamins B and C. This is secotroph. See the scale with the pellets and the pencil. This is hard feces. You will see this is quite different. It says on a wire net floor. This is shots for a guinea pig, and another one for rabbit, and you will see that the rabbits eat directly the soft feces when it is produced at the rectum. This is a small video showing this feeding behavior of secotrophy. This was a video that was done in a small farm for hare. Up, you will see behavior with some toilet, and also up, the hare is picking the soft feces. He swallows the feces, and you will see he's not masticating, it's only swallowing. Same in the nature for a young rabbit. So in the past, we believe, the ancient people believe, that the rabbit is ruminating because you see movement of the jaw while he is not eating anything. Okay, so the ancient people, the Jewish people, believe that the rabbit was a ruminant, but not. How secotrophy works? This is the part for the herbivorous digestion. Okay, you will see a zoom on the cecum. Okay, the ileum and stomach in red. This is the flow of digesta that arrive from the ileum, the end of the small intestine, to a crossroad here, the cecum, and the crossroad with the proximal colon. We see here this, if you make a dissection of a rabbit digestive system, you will see very easily this part. This is the sacculus rotundus. It is also a laphoid organ. Okay. And here again, and when you cut the cecum by 2, you will see inside some ostra. Okay, like the folds, spiral folds that are like a circular staircase, like in a lighthouse in the coast, for example, you see a staircase like in a lighthouse. And the digesta come from here and go to the end of the cecum and come back by mixing here from the top to the basis of the cecum before to go to the proximal colon. So here a schematic digesta movement is the secocolic segment, and it is possible to produce 2 types of feces for the rabbit, for the hare, and so on, because there are 2 types of movement for the proximal colon according to the time during the day. For example, you have here in the afternoon or the night when the rabbit is eating solid food, the proximal colon has a double activity. You see, to flow out the more large particles here, and also to flow back the fine particle and also bacteria. Fine particle, that means lower than 300 micro. And during secotroph excretion in the morning, the proximal colon has only one movement of moving down the content of the digesta without selection, so that the content of the cecum is flowing down almost without any modification to the distal colon. And distal colon is forming especially the soft feces, very differently from the hard feces. And this secotroph behavior occurs particularly in the morning. So you look at this figure. In the morning, when you have, it is depending on the lighting schedule. When you have a light at 7 and no light dark at 17, 19, if you have this with secotroph excretion period, okay, in the morning, and the secotroph are directly stored in the stomach, and you have very few pellets in the stomach at this movement. Okay, and in the afternoon or in the night, the rabbit is eating a lot of feed that you find branded, masticated in the stomach, and at this moment, the colon proximal is producing two types of movement, peristaltic and anti-peristaltic, and producing hard feces. If you look in the morning at a rabbit stomach, you will find something like that. Secotroph that are not modified, they are intact, more or less. And the feed, you see on the left part of this figure. If you look at the stomach with a photo, here the secotroph, here the feed. And when you look at the production of secotroph and the content of the stomach, you will see here the figure according to time, period with secotrophy were observed. Here mainly in the morning, but also a small part in the end of the night, also at 3 o'clock. And in quantity, more or less, you have 15 to 20 grams of dry matter produced as secotroph a day. How is it possible to estimate this point? To estimate the secotrophy, you have not very good methodology. It is very rustic methodology with a collar. We put the collar on the neck of the rabbit, so he is not able to bend and to heat the secotroph at the rectum. Donc maybe this method is an underestimation of the secotrophy because the rabbit is a bit stressed. Also, you have a lower intake, more or less. So with age, you will see here that in black here, the black line, that secotroph more or less is about 20 grams of dry matter a day, compared to feces that are more or less 50 or 60 grams dry matter a day for an intake of 140 grams, for example. This is valuable for European breed of rabbits. So you have a waste, which is hard feces with few good protein. You will see the composition here, and a large content in fiber, more or less 80%. It is rejected. Okay. And something which is very important, and the recycle it, the secotroph, with crude protein, about 30%, and less NDF, and also many vitamins. You will see that you have many vitamins from the group B in the secotroph. And also, you have essential amino acids that come from the bacterial protein, particularly lysine and methionine. And when you look at the contribution of the secotrophy to the intake of protein amino acids, you will see that 15 to 25% of the protein intake come from soft feces. So it's very important that the rabbit would be able to perform this soft feces production. And particularly for sulfur amino acid and lysine and threonine, soft feces are very important. So also for vitamins, since you have many vitamins B and C produced that are in the soft feces, it's not necessary to put such vitamin in the feed. Okay. And now we will move to the feeding behavior, the feeding pattern after weaning. Okay. So from the weaning, no more milk, so two sources of nutrients, solid feeds and secotroph. And as I said just before, the rabbit make many meals, small meals, but numerous one, 20 to 30 meals a day. This was observed with pelleted feed, but also with feed like grains and so on. So if you want to calculate the nutrient supply, and if you have ad libitum feeding, you should know the feed intake level, and also you should know the nutrient concentration of the feed. Here is a classical figure of the feeding behavior for a wean rabbit, adult or not, depending on the quantity, but more or less, you will see that the rabbit is always doing something. In the morning, apparently he do anything, but he do secotrophy, in fact. Secotrophy, very few water intake. But after this secotrophy period in the morning, in the dark period, we see dark period from here, it was from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. Just before the night, the rabbits increase a lot pellet intake and water intake. So the rabbit has a feeding behavior, a nocturnal feeding behavior. In the nature, the rabbit is a prey. It is predated by many other animals like dogs, etc. So the rabbits protect him by have a hitching behavior in the wilderness during the night. He has more or less the same behavior in farms for domestic rabbits. Here is some figures, and you will see the number of meals per day for a rabbit that is 10 weeks old. More or less, you have 40 meals per day with small quantity. So even with a small feeder, and if you have in a cage a small feeder and 5 to 6 rabbits, for example, the competition to access the feeder is not very important for the rabbit compared to pigs, for example. Okay. There is no feed competition usually for the rabbits. You have also many drinking meal a day, more or less 30 a day or more, depending. Here's another example of the circadian feeding of growing rabbit or adult rabbit. So adult rabbit in green, young rabbit in yellow, and you will see some differences. You can have also some large modification of the feeding behavior according to the physiological status of the rabbit, and particularly when the rabbit female is pregnant and just before the birth of the litter, the feed intake change, and also the feed intake change a lot when she milk. I come back to this figure, you will see already. And remember that if you give dry feeds and you don't give sufficient water or water with bad quality or no water, if you have no water, the intake is cancelled in one day. So if you give dry feed, for example, seeds, whole grains, or pellets, be very careful to the quality and quantity of the water. It is very, very important. Here is, you will find it in books, for example, that the intake regulation is proportional to the metabolic weight. So that rabbits try to reach a similar digestible energy intake. DE is digestible energy intake. And for the young rabbit, more or less, the regulation works for a range to reach 200 or 240 kilocalories of digestible energy per kilo of metabolic weight. And for the female, this value is about 300 kilocalories of digestible energy per kilo of metabolic weight. If I come back to the female, take go down very quickly, more or less zero sometimes, but after killing, feed intake is increasing a lot. You will see for Ibrahim rabbits, the feed intake can reach. That means water intake is about 800 or 1 liter, 1 liter of water per day. So take care of the water and take care of the feed intake of this female. It is very, very important. And at the end of lactation, when you are weaning the young, the feed intake go down and come back again at about 150 grams per day. Look now at some external factors. Okay, and particularly temperature is a result with composition of pelleted feeds. Take care, for example, first at the quality of the ingredients. If you have a rapid drop of intake, so if you have some scratching or wasting, be careful at the quality. For example, the mold, rabbit is sensible to the mold. If here it was some result from maize, which was not very dried or dried afterwards, and you will see that if you have many mold here in red, the intake is reducing 10% or even more. While for the rats, there is no change of intake, whatever the quantity of the mold. The feed presentation also it is important and is able to modulate the feed intake of the rabbit. Here you will see feed, the same feed, exactly the same ingredients presented as a flour or as a pellets, and you will see that the rabbit eat more food, less 94 grams per day, and also have a higher weight gain and a good feed conversion, a lower feed conversion. Feed conversion is better here. If you make some pellets also, the diameter of the pellet is important. When the diameter is very low, like that, the hardness of the pellet is higher, and the feed intake is not so high compared to a medium diameter of the pellet. Here, 120 grams of intake, 110 here. Be careful, the rabbits like to have some hard material, sometimes to play with them, but for feeding, you don't like to have hard material too much, not too much, particularly for the young rabbits. It's a different situation to grinding and to heat for nutrition. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah. Here is a regulation of intake according to the digestible energy level of the feed. So if I have feed ranging from 1,800 grams kilocalorie per kilo to 3,000 kilocalorie per kilo, you see that the regulation of the feed intake is not very good. Only 65%, and this is the hair square here, of the energy concentration explain the variations of feed intake. So energy is not the only way to predict the feed intake. You can use also fiber intake. This regulation is possible if your feed contains between 220 to 200 kilocalories of digestible energy. If you make the same figure here, the feed intake according to the acid detergent fiber, ADF, content of the feed, you will see that the adjustment of this regulation is very precise, because here you can predict 92% of the variation of feed intake are explained by the ADF content of the feed. Now we look at some feed intake and performance according to temperature. But also as a next lesson in 1 week, I will explain more in detail regulation of intake according to temperature, and particularly according to tropical climate, for example. But for every mammal, and the rabbit also, this is the case also, the feed intake move according to the ambient temperature. And you will see the pellet intake at 30 degrees is only 120 grams per day. And the most comfortable temperature for the rabbit is about 18 degrees when you have a good pellet intake and a water feed ratio very good and a good daily gain also. It is for European condition here. Also for the rabbit doe, and particularly for the milk production, it's very important, this milk production. And we see here on the right part of this graph that if you have a very high temperature, 30 degrees here, for example, the feed intake and the water intake are dropped, and the milk production decreases sharply by 30%, more or less. Okay, so very important to look carefully at the feed intake of the female. In free choice situations in Europe, for example, you will see that in the nature, in the wild, the rabbits are able to eat many parts of field. Here it is for growing cereals, and the wild rabbits find this growing cereals very palatable. You see the area which is quite scraped by the rabbits. And you can have the same here for the other field, completely scratched by rabbits, living probably in this forest or in this forest here. In winter, the rabbit is also able to eat the bark of some trees, like apple trees, for example, etc., etc. In the wild, but also if in the for companion rabbit, for example, the rabbit has clear food preferences, and he prefer herbaceous plants like the grasses. He prefer compared to legumes and also to carrots. So the umbelliferae, like the carrots, is not very preferred by the rabbits, contrary to the legends. The rabbit is also able to eat some tree leaves, and sometimes for some farmers that have rabbit outside, they use tree leaves to feed the rabbits, particularly when there is a lack of grasses, for example, in the field. So rabbits are very sensitive to the organoleptic quality of the food. Well, concretely and practically, if you see an under consumption or low intake, you have to check several things, particularly the water quantity and quality, particularly if you give only dry feeds. You have to check the feed presentation, hardness of the pellet, particularly for the young rabbit, or pellets that are crumbly or dust or floor. The rabbit don't like very much to have dust in the feeder. You can have also very high digestible energy concentration, not enough fiber, and this can reduce the intake too much. Protein quality is very important. If there is error in formulation, for example, excess in methionine, the feed intake is decreasing. And also, when you prepare feed for rabbits, you have to look at the quality of the ingredients, particularly the molds. Here's some photo in some factories or small workshop here to prepare some feed. So you have to look at the balance of the feed, the quality of the ingredient, and so on. So in conclusion, remember that the rabbits make numerous meals, particularly during the night. The stomach of a rabbit is always more or less always with some feed inside, either the pelleted feeds or either soft feces. In complete opposition with ruminant, the fiber increase in the diet results in an acceleration of vegetative transit that could lead really to an increase of the feed intake. And reversely, if the digestible energy is very high, is you make more grains in the feed and less grasses, for example, the feed intake is reducing a lot. And sometimes if the feed intake is too low, you can have a too low protein intake or vitamin intake. So you have to look at the balance of the feed. So for all these reasons, rabbits feeding is a bit more complex than for poultry or for pig, since you have to look at the nutrient intake and fiber intake too. Maybe you can see that this rabbit is eating some straw, but really not. This is a female that is preparing his nest. She brought straw to the nest for her litter. And now we will move to the next part. I speak about feeding behavior. And now we will see one section of the nutritional requirements for the rabbits. It is the fibers and the digestive health in the growing rabbits. Okay. I have, how much time I have now for this to finish the lesson? 30 minutes?
Will you going to play a video for 30 minutes?
30 minutes is okay?
Okay.
Okay. And after we will ask some questions. So this is the index for my talk about fiber and digestive health. And remember that most of this item relate with the European rabbit farming systems using pelleted feeds and using also for quite high production of high productive systems. Okay. In fact, what is the context in our farm for rabbit and also for small farms? That's you have digestive troubles around the weaning. And this is explained by the fact that you will see the rabbit is moving from milk to solid food within 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And so the digestive system have to move a lot within these 2 or 3 weeks around weaning. And this make that sometimes the adjustment of the digestive system is not good and you have some digestive troubles. It's possible to use some preventive antibiotic, but now in Europe, this type of prophylaxis is forbidden. And it is also a high cost. What is exactly this digestive troubles? It is diarrhea most of the time, but also you can have also some mucus in the rectum or some cecal infections. And the intake troubles like weak growth, behavior troubles, soft feces on the floor, for example. And the origins is various with infectious origins like parasites, coccidiosis, or some bacteria, colibacillosis also, or the rabbit enteropathy, epizootic enteropathy, like we call REE. You also have some non-infectious risk factor like the stress, environment, climate, and so on, ventilation or heating that are not well adjusted, or unbalanced feed. And effectively, for the rabbit, he is an herbivore, and the nutrition, the feeding has a good impact on the health, and particularly an insufficient fiber intake correspond to a higher risk of digestive trouble after weaning. If I come back to the pellet for a growing rabbit, you will see that the fiber for a correctly balanced pellet, fiber is about 40% of the feed. If you look at NDF, natural detergent fiber, you can have 35 to 40% of fiber. Even when you look at total dietary fiber, you can have 50% of the feed that is total dietary fiber. And in the past, when we look at recommendations, in the past, before the 18th, for example, the people that make some recommendation were not in agreement. They recommend 6% of crude fiber or 10% or more depend. So very variable and not precise. So we try to improve this precision of the fiber recommendation, and we look to other criteria than only crude fiber. Crude fiber is very good to select the ingredient, to look at the ingredients themselves, not to predict the digestive health of the rabbit. So, okay, to look at the composition of the ingredient, but not to prepare the digestive health of the rabbit. Just some recalls on fiber. What is fiber exactly? What is the structure, the analytical method, and so on. You will look at this slide when you will be at home, but it is only a recall. For the plant cell, there is a cell wall, very sticky sometimes, and increasing with edge of the plant. You will see in 3 dimensions the primary wall, secondary walls, and the middle lamella, which is inside the cell. So the cell is producing layer after layer the cell walls, like this is a structure of the plants to be originated. And when you look at these cell walls, you will see the different classes, big classes. You will find the pectins, particularly middle lamellar primary wall, to stick the cell together. And you will have hemicellulose and cellulose when the plant is aging. And when the plant is aging more, you have lignins, lately produced secondary walls is the lignins plus cellulose. Here is a chemical composition of pectin. You will see it is polysaccharides that are sometimes soluble in water. So it is acid polyglyceronic. And these molecules is relatively digestible by the rabbits. You can have also the cellulose, for example, the cellulose is a major polysaccharide in the earth. For example, the cotton. Cotton is pure cellulose, this beta and cat link D glucose units with very long chains with the polymerization which is very high, from 8,000 to 10,000 glucose in this chain. So the cellulose is very structured. We see the structure on the right part of this slide, and the digestion of cellulose is very difficult because of this structure, and is only possible also by enzymes from bacteria. The same is for pectins. Only enzymes of bacteria are able to degrade and to the fibers. But the primary wall also is very complex because you have arrangements of cellulose and hemicellulose, you will see, with some special bonds, H bonds, that makes sometimes difficult to digest by the animals, even for them. And additionally to this, you will see the wall is not very simple because you have pectins that are mixing with the primary walls. And you can have also some primary wall with some protein, hydroxyprotein, for example, that add complexity of this plant wall. So the fiber are a very complex nature, like proteins. You see the nature of proteins is very diversified. Similarly, the diversification of fiber are very high. You will see in a 3D representation of the primary cell wall, you will see that is not so easy. Okay. And to this wall, you can add a secondary wall and also the lignins. But lignins are not sugars. Lignins are non-saccharidic polymers. They are built up from 3 phenylpropane units, and they are resistant to most chemical enzymatic agents, and only even the bacteria are not able to break the lignins. Okay, only some mushrooms are able to digest the lignin. If you have many lignins, the digestion is very low. This is a simple classification. The fibers. What I say here for fiber are available for every animal and for human nutrition too. It's the same system. And this is some method to estimate the fibers, particularly in animal feeding. You will see that crude fiber, this is largely used. It is a very, very old method, very simple, cheap, precise, but it corresponds to a mix of lignin and cellulose, not always the same proportion. And after that, 50 years ago, Fernsoust in USA developed a sequential method with different detergents to try to separate lignin from cellulose and from hemicellulose. And more recently, we have some other methods that are able to analyze the major part of fiber, including the pectins too. And more recently too, there is some water-soluble fiber section that we see here that could be analyzed by a neutral detergent-soluble fiber method. Just an idea of the composition of fiber on some raw material. If you look at the alfalfa meals, you will see a good balance with pectin, cellulose, compared, for example, to beet pulp. So there is many more pectins and few lignins. Beet pulp, for example, is very digestible for the rabbit. So we use those criteria, NDF, ADF, and ADL for our detergent lignin to try to predict the digestive health of the rabbit. We will see that. I will move this one. when we look at the digestibility of this fiber, you will see that lignins is not digestible. Poorly digestible is the cellulose, and moderately digestible is hemicellulose, and quite highly digestible is the pectins and water insoluble fiber. So what is the situation for the rabbit? If you increase the dietary fiber level, generally you increase the intake, but the digestibility is reducing, and the feed efficiency is poor, and the feeding cost increase. So for the nutritionist, if you reduce fiber and diet, you will reduce the nutritional cost. But the best fiber level is not always the lowest, because when you look in the farm, you will see that when you have too low dietary fiber, you have diarrhea and very often mortality of the young rabbits. So we measure the digestive health of the rabbit by measuring not only mortality, but also the morbidity. Okay, and we construct a new index, which is health risk index, mortality and morbidity. For example, in an experiment, you will see here, for there is a 70% mortality from weaning to slaughter with fiber deficient feed. And when you look at the morbidity is low growth, take troubles, and so on, and you measure it every day, you will see that mortality is only the emerged part of the iceberg, and you will have 36% of morbidity below mortality. And the health risk index for that is the sum of mortality and morbidity. So it's very important to measure these criteria in large group of animals, okay? Because 10% mortality for 10 animals is only one animal dead. It's very different measuring 100 deaths on 1,000 animals, for example. So to measure the health, you need large experimental design. And if you look at the first question with one fiber criterion, is it possible to predict the mortality? And when you look at this meta-analysis from different countries, from different studies, there's 12 studies, 46 diets without any antibiotic. And you will look at the relationship between mortality after weaning and the ADF concentration of the feed is not good. No real correlation. See? Okay. And if you move, for example, here is 6 studies with 22 diets without antibiotics, and we relate dietary ADF concentration also. The relationship is a bit better, but not very good. In fact, between 15 and 20% of ADF, we have no real relationship, not sufficiently precise to predict the health risk index for the growing. So one criterion is not sufficient to predict this health risk index after weaning. And we try to relate other criteria. For example, we make large studies and we look at the starch level. The question is if the starch play a major role or not on digestive health. So we make a factorial design with a 2x2 factorial design, starch and ADF, low or high starch, low and high ADF. And we combine the two with a large scale study, and we see that only the ADF level is able to reduce mortality, and that starch level has no significant effect on the mortality after weaning. So it's very important to understand this point too. Okay. And on the health risk index, the same conclusion. Mortality and morbidity, same conclusion, no effect of starch on morbidity too. Another way to show that is to look at the starch concentration at the end of the intestine, because starch is largely digested in the small intestine, and you will see that according to different quality of starch, starch very highly digested like extruded maize, or starch very hardly digested like the maize, you will see that the starch level at ileum move from 2% to 11%. Okay. But for this difference of starch moving at the ileum, you have not any difference in mortality. It is another way to show that the starch quality is not very important for the prediction of mortality after weaning. To the very old studies, there is no risk that you have a risk for lower deficiency, for deficiency of fiber. Just have a look at this point, at this figure. In other studies, here is a meta-analysis of 6 studies and 19 diets, and we relate the lignin concentration to the health risk index after weaning, and you will see that the relationship here is quite good, because 77% of the ADL concentration explain the variation of health risk index after weaning. Okay, so we can, from this type of curve, we can recommend a minimum of 5% of ADL in the feed. Okay. Okay. We move more quickly on this point, and we also look at the proportion of highly digestible fibers, DGF, digestible fiber, divided by ADF, the ratio of highly digested to lower digested fibers. And you will see here the relationship between this ratio in the feeds with the health risk index. And 70% of the health risk index is explained by the variation of this ratio, in fact. If the ADF is very low, you will see here less than 15%, the health risk index is increasing. Okay, so to try to reduce this health risk index, we have to balance between poorly digested fiber and highly digested fiber with a ratio over 1.3. And if you look at the IGRAN feedstuff table, it is a European table that were published in World of Rabbit Science, you have this details about fiber for the composition of raw materials, while WIP is water insoluble pectins, DGF is digestible fiber. Okay, and we have also NDF, ADL, and this is important to formulate correctly the pelleted feed for growing rabbits. So, for the growing rabbit, you have to look to lignins, you have to look to cellulose, and it is a poorly digestible fibers, and you have to look to digestible fiber too. So the balance between the two types. And when you look at the recommendation in France, you recommend fibers in 3 key points. You can have, after weaning, at least 19% of lignocellulose, and you can reduce a bit by 2% at the end of fattening. And you also should have lignins at least 5 to 5.5%, and a good ratio of digestible to lower digestible fiber. 3 key points here. This is true, again, this is true for quite intensive rabbit farming using pelleted feeds and only pelleted feeds. So I will go to the conclusions and perspective too. So you will see recommendation on fiber intake, and this works mainly in conventional indoor system. When you have all other constraints that are filled, good housing, high productive potential of the rabbit breed, pelleted balanced feed, and good prophylaxis. First, for developing a rabbit production chain, it is important to have a progress step by step. That I said about the requirement for the feeds of the growing rabbits, you have to remember that we need fiber intake. And if you have a very productive system with an intensive farm, intensive system, you have to formulate very precisely the feed. As if you have, so recommendation for feed and so on is valid, particularly when you increase the productivity of your animal. If the productivity is low, you can have low requirement. And we will see that on the next lesson in 1 week. But I would like to give some perspective about the for developing rabbit production chain. One of the first steps is sometimes, frequently, to create small groups of rabbit farmers in a local area. And the conditions to succeed in rabbit productions is not only the feed, but also the rabbits, and also the breeder, and also the raising facilities and the market. So you have to evaluate all these things. Okay, it is valid for companion rabbits or meat rabbits too. It seems very difficult to succeed alone, and farmers should work as a group. It is very efficient to succeed collectively. And for example, you should have to look at the autonomy of decisions, that the farmers take part to the decision. They should have this solidarity between members and training of the farmer. This last point, training of the farmer, is very important to construct new production chain. This is a success story in France for a group of breeders. And you will see in 1981, 11 breeders with a technician paid by the breeder, half-time technicians, and they have 3,000 rabbit does. Okay, and by year they produce with 3,000 rabbit doe about 176,000 slaughtered rabbits. And in 25, 30 years, they go from 11 breeders only to 220 breeders with 45 employees. You see the production with a quite different production in 20 years, from a small farm to very intensive farm with insemination, etc., etc. So their secret, 3 key points: autonomy in decision for the farmers groups, solidarity, and training of the farmers. This is the end of my talk for today. And I will stop the screen sharing and I come back for any question if you want.
Okay. Thank you for complete explanation, especially about fiber, good fiber. And yeah. Thank you for the amazing lecture, Dr. Terry. And now I would like to offer a chance to the audience, to the students who want to ask questions. Does anyone want to ask a question? Don't worry, it's fine to ask question in Bahasa Indonesia also. Okay?
Excuse me, I want to ask to Mr. Terry.
Okay.
Okay, excuse me. As I know about some information in the internet state that the mind of the rapid of fit is high, is more than 80 is high, 5% pellet and 10% vegetable, and just 5 treat fit like maybe in here dried carrot, apple, dried apple, and some edible flower. How about your opinion about it? And I also I asked the rabbit breeder, I'm not really trusted because I know about the uh, uh, for example of the Timothy High is just have protein content just 8, more or less 8% maybe. So how about this information? And the second, visit my end experience, why the during of the rainy season, the mortality rate of the rabbit is higher than the dry season, especially in Abani. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Okay, I try to understand to answer to this question. Alors, for the next lesson, we will look more particularly to the importance of the climate, in particular tropical conditions, for the rabbit pollutions. And here, just a short answer. Effectively, in a rainy season, rabbits produce less because they suffer from the temperature and humidity. And so the intake of the animal is not the same, and the comfort, the thermoregulation and comfort is not very good for the rabbits. So the feed also is possibly the feed is more difficult to have dry and good quality feed without moisture and so on. Another point to see also is that during rainy season, the parasites like coccidiosis and so on are increasing a lot. Parasites like coccidia like the temperature, high temperature like 25, 30 degrees, and they like a lot to have humidity. So if you have many humidity, probably parasites increase. And this is one of the main reasons to have a wire net floor of the rabbit farming in Europe is to try to fight again coccidiosis. And probably for your rabbit system, you should look at these different points: quality of ingredients, parasitism, and feed intake of animals and housing. And maybe to try to find system to dry the feed, if possible.
Okay. Oh, Guru. Say or any question again. It's clear what the answer.
We will come back again on this point next Tuesday.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I have a question, Dr. Thierry.
Yes.
If rabbit, if our rabbit, the feeding more or higher protein compared to the higher crude fiber, what is the effect to the biological or physiological and gastrointestinal tract, for example, maybe in small intestine? What is the effect? Okay, maybe you
Yes.
have experience.
In fact, actually, we know that fiber intake, a minimum fiber intake is necessary for the growing rabbit. Is also necessary for the adult rabbit, but the intake could be a bit lower proportionally. 15% ADF for an adult rabbit is okay, because it's outside the risk period of the weaning. Okay. For the young rabbit, so when you increase the fiber intake, you increase also the motricity of this tract, but you favor particularly microbial activity. One of the main explanation we have, my hypothesis is that when you provide sufficiently digestible fibers, you stimulate the microbial activity in the cecum, and this is very important for the rabbit to have a balanced microbial activity and a balanced digestion in the small intestine. Protein, starch, lipids are quite totally digested before the cecum. Okay, and more or less only the fiber is arriving to the cecum to feed the microbiota, in fact. And when around the weaning, the digestive system is balancing, is moving from monogastric, before weaning is only monogastric because you have only milk, to an herbivorous system. You have many changes, including the immune status of the young rabbit, because microbiota participate a lot to the maturation of the immune status of the young animal. So during the weaning period, during 3-4 weeks, is very important period, changing of digestive system with a balancing with monogastric to herbivorous, balancing the two, changing the feed behavior, changing the feeds also. So that when you increase the fiber supply, you go more comfortably, more quickly to the balanced systems with herbivore and monogastric. You will look again at this point at the next lesson also.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Audience, maybe any other question? Yeah. I think.
This is Kelly.
Yeah.
It's nutritionist. Yeah. Maybe you have a question, please.
Yes, I don't understand why. Can you repeat? Because the sound is not very good.
Yeah, okay. I just mentioned the name of nutritionist lecturer here is Mrs. Haley. Yeah, it's participant here. But okay, I have a question also. What do you think if we we prepare the diet for the young rabbits with the fermented grass or legume to the young rabbits. What do you think about this?
Okay, I'm not sure to correctly understand because the sound is very terrible. I don't know why.
Okay.
So I understand that, yes, in European systems, the farmer have more or less 3 different type of feed. One feed special during the weaning, one feed special for milking dough, and one feed for fattening rabbit and adult animals. Okay, but more or less all the professional rabbit farmer have one batch systems. That means that all the female are pregnant at the same times. They kindle at the same times. You win all the rabbits at the same times, and so on. So you can manage a strategy for feed your rabbit more precisely. Okay, but this is for very intensive systems, and you can have very different systems with lower precision about the fiber requirements, about protein requirements, and so on. And we will look at these different systems at the next lessons too. I will present different systems from the most intensive to the more extensive. And for extensive system, when you don't ask very high production to the rabbit, you can have lower requirements, of course. You can produce rabbit with very simple systems with local ingredients and so on. Rabbit is you can have a good adaptation, many solutions to breed the rabbits, in fact.
Thank you.
Okay. Maybe Bu Heli.
Iya, Pak Nurkolis. Gimana? Sorry.
Hello.
Halo.
Yes.
Please.
Okay. Sorry, I just learned about rabbit nutrition. Is there a balance between fiber and protein in rabbit like ruminants? And a second, what is the difference between giving fiber from grass in the form of pellet or long grass?
Yes. Effectively, if you look at the requirement for a feed, you have a balance between fiber and protein, effectively, and also the digestible energy level is very important to look. We see this recommendation too. The size of the pellets, as I said, is very important. Size, hardness of the pellet also is important to look. To reduce the waste, effectively, to reduce scrape, because the rabbits, when you don't like something, you scratch, you can have wasting by floor also. But this is a system for intensive production, but you can have also production of rabbit with grain, whole grains, grasses, wastes of vegetables, etc., legumes. You can use flour also to improve a bit digestion. Mixing grains and try to grind them a bit, just a bit, not completely flour, but big grinding, for example. So you can show during this lesson the system because many studies were performed with European conventional systems, but there are many types of productions for the rabbits. Yeah, not only one, depending what you expect from your rabbit and the genotype of the rabbit and the way to reproduce the animals. If you have a highly intensive reproduction system or not. Also, we will look at this point more precisely at the next lesson. You have to invent your own system, in fact, according to the farmers you have, and the facilities you have, and so on, to adapt.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. With all the questions already asked and with the time limit approaching, I would like to close the lecture today. And again, I appreciate the time and effort given by Dr. Thierry today to attend our guest lecture as a keynote speaker. I hope today's session is beneficial to all of us, and with this virtual class is over, students and audience are allowed to leave the Zoom meeting. Thank you for all for your time, and Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you,
Thank you. Thank you for your attention, and see you next week.
Okay, thank you.
It is
See
a
you next
pleasure.
week.
It is a pleasure to discuss with you, to exchange with you. Thank you very much.